What happens when a discarded heir receives the one power his enemies cannot understand? Field Rose enters exile carrying 500 gold coins, 200 slaves, and a secret map. 3 days earlier, he was Qin Hao, an ordinary man living on Earth. Then he awakens inside the body of Count Rose's most despised son. The original Field possesses noble blood, yet kindness has reduced him to a family joke. He surrendered his combat awakening potion so his younger brother could gain strength. He also gave his academy position to a sister who wanted magical training. Servants remember his generosity, but his relatives interpret every sacrifice as weakness. Count Rose now summons him before the family and announces his supposed independence. The ceremonial language sounds honorable, though everyone understands that Field is being expelled. His new territory is Nightfall Domain, a poisoned wasteland beyond the northern border. 10 years ago, Imperial forces released corrupting fog there against 300,000 beastmen. The weapon destroyed its targets, then transformed people, animals, and plants into monsters. 3 recovery armies entered afterward, and none returned with enough survivors to claim victory. Even desperate criminals refuse to hide there because the land itself hunts intruders. On official maps, Nightfall remains a noble domain, but reality offers only death. Field requests soldiers' supplies or money needed to establish a functioning settlement. His stepmother rejects every request before Count Rose can provide a meaningful answer. The exhausted Count sits pale and silent, visibly controlled by the woman beside him. Field receives 500 gold coins and permission to bring his personal household servants. That amount could support a journey, but never rebuild an abandoned northern province. His half-brother approaches afterward, eager to enjoy the humiliation at close range. The young man mocks Field's black hair and dark eyes inherited from his mother. She was a foreign maid sold into the castle, making Field unacceptable among proud nobles. Yet the brother's next revelation strikes much deeper than another insult about ancestry. A flaxen-haired woman once loved by the original Field was found dead behind a tavern. His brother admits causing her death and remembers the experience with shameless pleasure. Grief and rage shattered the original Field's health until his body finally failed. The death created the opening through which Qin Hao entered this unfamiliar world. The new Field feels the dead man's fury rising through every tightened muscle. He still restrains himself long enough to ask why such cruelty was directed at him. His brother blames the combat potion Field generously surrendered years before. The potion failed to make him a first-rank knight, exposing his miserable natural talent. Rather than accept failure, he convinces himself that Field secretly poisoned the gift. He then promises to kidnap and torture any woman Field might love again. That threat finally breaks the restraint Field has maintained since entering this body. His knee drives into the brother's stomach and launches him backward across the floor. Before anyone reacts, Field follows and kicks the arrogant noble directly across his face. Blood scatters as the watching relatives freeze before an impossible transformation. The obedient son they tormented would never have answered cruelty with open violence. Field grabs the golden curls and prepares to smash his brother against the ground. A hand suddenly closes around his throat and lifts him completely off his feet. The attacker is a beautiful woman with wine-red hair and an illuminated forehead rune. She is God-chosen, a woman empowered beyond ordinary combat aura and conventional magic. Only women receive such divine abilities, making each awakened candidate extraordinarily valuable. Field's brother already commands one despite possessing little strength or personal merit. The woman throws Field into a wall, leaving blood in his mouth and pain everywhere. His brother demands an execution, but the God-chosen allows Field to stagger away. Field cannot defeat her now, so he refuses to waste his life on pride. He leaves while silently promising that strength will eventually bring him back for revenge. His confidence comes from a mysterious system that appeared after his transmigration. Only Field can see its map, where a green marker moves toward an unknown destination. Territorial lords normally contract God-chosen women and receive special talents through those bonds. The original Field never displayed such talent, but Qin Hao's arrival awakened something rare. That moving green point may lead toward the advantage required for survival. Field packs immediately while his butler Chow gathers money, servants, and travel necessities. Chow resembles a man approaching his funeral because he understands their destination perfectly. Outside the estate, a cavalry squad waits in mismatched equipment under Captain Connor. The riders claim to provide protection, though their appearance suggests bandits wearing imperial armor. Field suspects their true purpose is ensuring that he reaches his assigned death sentence. Instead of heading north immediately, he orders a detour through Golden Eagle City. The city offers supplies and the green marker currently rests somewhere inside its walls. Golden Eagle is controlled by Field's second sister and produces enormous yearly tax revenue. Her city earns 600,000 gold coins while Field possesses only 500. Gate guards harass commoners until they recognize noble cavalry approaching through the crowded road. They quickly clear the entrance and bow, proving that Field's title still carries weight. The system marker guides him through the northern district toward the city's slave market. A brutal stench of waste-rotting feed and unwashed bodies greets the entire procession. Connor gags openly while traders ignore conditions that have become ordinary business. Several captives share cages too small for eating, sleeping, and relieving themselves separately. Many carry whip scars, while others stare downward with eyes emptied by repeated suffering. Slave merchants surround Field because wealthy nobles remain their most profitable customers. One weasel-faced trader explains prices while Field secretly follows the marker between cages. Goblins and halflings cost little while beast folk command a considerably higher price. The merchant proudly advertises an elf whose suffering has already destroyed her spirit. His casual description of abuse and exploitation makes Field understand this society's real nature. These nobles are not elegant figures from romantic dramas, but predators protected by law. Then the green marker stops above a neglected cage in a shadowed corner. Inside lies a wolf subhuman woman with white hair, red eyes, ears, and tail. Although she appears exhausted, her gaze repeatedly measures the keys hanging from the merchant. Field reaches toward her head, briefly overwhelmed by meeting a real wolf-eared woman. She growls sharply, forcing Connor toward his sword and Chow into immediate panic. Field withdraws his hand, recognizing equal measures of fear, defiance, and hidden intelligence. The merchant demands 3 gold coins, far above the normal subhuman market price. Field exposes the obvious scam and offers 50 silver with promises of future purchases. Greed defeats resistance once the trader hears that Nightfall needs a large workforce. Field buys 100 humans, 100 subhumans, and the wolf woman together. The entire purchase costs 53 gold coins and includes 120 adult men. The merchant provides a soul contract signed with the captive's blood on sheepskin. Divine fire will destroy anyone who directly violates the registered owner's commands. The trader suggests that Field may now use the captives however he desires. Field has no interest in pleasure while preparing to enter a corrupted wilderness. He needs labor defenders, farmers, and enough people to create a surviving settlement. His remaining money must purchase food tools, horses, and church-made fog-clearing lanterns. Chow approaches the merchant guild seeking a loan and returns looking utterly defeated. Every lender refuses after hearing Field's name, regardless of collateral or repayment conditions. His second sister ordered merchants to charge him 10 times normal prices and offer nothing. Every relative appears committed to preventing Field from reaching Nightfall alive. The original Field saved nothing because he donated nearly all personal income elsewhere. One portion supported the family treasury, while the remainder supplied northern border defenses. His generosity leaves Qin Hao perhaps the poorest noble in the entire empire. Field spends 180 gold coins on provisions, farming tools, books, and horses. 17 aging animals join the caravan, barely sufficient for transporting 200 people. Mercenaries reject his offers immediately after learning that Nightfall Domain is their destination. One advises him to flee the country, but Field refuses to surrender his only opportunity. The caravan rests overnight, and the wolf woman receives her first proper bath in months. Beneath the filth, her hair is snow-white, silky, and unexpectedly beautiful. Her composed features suggest maturity, though trembling ears reveal fear she cannot conceal. She struggles to speak because no one has treated her as human for weeks. After several attempts, she finally identifies herself by the name Ashina. The green marker disappears immediately, replaced by a system panel visible only to Field. It identifies Ashina as an unawakened wolf cavalry god chosen suffering severe malnutrition. Field nearly loses his composure as the meaning of this discovery becomes clear. His map can locate potential god-chosen women before official testing reveals them. The kingdom spends enormous resources testing eligible women every year because candidates are exceptionally rare. Field may accomplish the same task simply by following markers that no rival can see. Could this frightened slave become the weapon that transforms Nightfall into a real domain? Excitement sends Field pacing across the room and striking the air with clenched fists. Ashina interprets every movement as preparation for some inventive form of torture. She has already considered resisting even though the soul contract would burn her alive. Death seems preferable to another master using her body and dignity for entertainment. Yet the maids washed her gently and provided the softest clothing she has ever worn. Those unexpected acts of care confuse her enough to postpone desperate resistance. Field calmly explains that he purchased everyone to develop his northern territory. Ashina doubts him because human nobles rarely treat subhumans as workers or future citizens. The maids even suggested that her real duty would involve sharing Field's bed. Her modest uniform contradicts that assumption, covering everything except hands and lower legs. Field decides that food will communicate his intentions more effectively than further explanations. When servants bring steak, honey bread, and sauce, Ashina quietly moves to the floor. She waits in a corner for scraps, behaving according to lessons beaten into her. Field takes her hand and seats her at the table despite her visible suspicion. She balances on the chair's edge, expecting a whip to appear after every movement. Once assured that the steak belongs to her, Ashina takes one cautious bite. Hunger immediately overwhelms restraint, and she devours 3 steaks with 5 loaves of bread. Her stomach becomes round while Field watches with relief and growing satisfaction. Healthy meals are not generosity alone because awakening requires her body to recover first. Field presents the idea of training her until she might become God-chosen. He conceals the system's certainty and frames the plan as a difficult experiment. Ashina explains that even major cities produce only a few God-chosen across generations. She has never heard of a human lord contracting a subhuman candidate either. Field insists that failure cannot be known before a serious attempt begins. Privately, he understands that failure probably means death somewhere inside Nightfall's fog. Ashina accepts the training plan once she learns that steady supplies of meat are included. For 10 days, the caravan travels north through towns increasingly shaped by border warfare. Field purchases meat and magical supplements until Ashina's health steadily returns. He also buys purification potions, awakening crystals, and several costly fog-clearing lanterns. Those necessities consume another 150 gold coins from his shrinking reserve. During the journey, Field recognizes the financial motive behind his siblings' hatred. Count Rose grows weaker daily, and imperial law divides his wealth among surviving children. Removing one heir increases every remaining sibling's eventual share of the inheritance. Nightfall was never merely exile, it was murder disguised as a territorial appointment. The caravan eventually reaches Cashin Fortress, the final stronghold, before the northern wasteland. Baron Bull's castle rises from the mountains with stone towers and formidable defensive walls. Ashina hides inside a wagon and secretly begs the wolf deity to choose her. Recent days feel unreal after years defined by cages, hunger, and humiliation. She rides comfortably, eats fresh meat, and receives assistance from human maids. Part of her still suspects Field is preparing her for a dark sacrificial ritual. Chow sighs dramatically and treats the fortress as the final civilized place he will see. He reminds Field that the original heir donated personal funds to Baron Bull repeatedly. Those donations supported local villagers, soldiers, and apparently the Baron's private celebrations. Field hopes that years of goodwill might at least secure cooperation at the border. Then his system map displays several red skull symbols racing toward the caravan. Field summons Captain Connor and warns that an approaching threat is closing quickly. Connor laughs because Cashin supposedly anchors the Empire's strongest defensive line. He boasts that any danger appearing there would make him eat his horse's droppings. Connor also accuses Field of inventing excuses to avoid entering Nightfall domain. Field gives no argument and quietly slows the cart's slaves and household servants. Connor's cavalry consequently moves ahead and becomes the caravan's exposed front line. Minutes later, frightened refugees burst from the road with a corpse horde behind them. Gray-eyed monsters in farmers' clothing sprint forward beneath a suffocating wave of decay. The smell reaches the caravan from far away, carrying rot and corrupted bodily fluid. Connor's expression hardens as his recent mockery transforms into immediate embarrassment. Despite his attitude, he forms 20 riders and leads them onto elevated ground. The cavalry charges downhill with lances lowered against the tightly packed corpse creatures. Steel punches through decayed bodies and throws broken monsters from the lance points. Purple blood sprays across horses and armor while the riders circle for another attack. Chain hammers crush skulls, sabers remove limbs, and iron hooves trample fallen creatures. Meanwhile, Field orders the slaves to connect wooden carts into a defensive barrier. He promises rewards to anyone willing to stand and fight beside him. Fear keeps nearly everyone behind the carts trembling instead of reaching for tools. Chow clutches Field's robe and recommends abandoning the slaves during a strategic retreat. Field pushes him away, warning that greater horrors wait beyond the border. Then Ashna leaves the wagon and places her shaking body between Field and danger. Her fists rise despite flattened ears and legs that barely remain steady. She intends to protect the man who fed her even without awakened strength. The refugees reach the barrier while several corpses slip past Connor's mounted formation. Those monsters crash against the carts and claw mindlessly instead of moving around them. When nobody advances, Field draws his sword and approaches the nearest opening himself. This body retains basic training, allowing him to time one careful thrust. His blade enters a corpse's neck before tearing sideways through rotten tissue. The head collapses against its chest while the stench nearly forces Field to vomit. Beneath his disgust, however, an unfamiliar excitement awakens during the struggle. The original body may possess a warrior's instincts that death never completely erased. Field's confidence rises too quickly after the first monster falls before him. A severed corpse crawls unseen toward his ankle and prepares to bite. Ashina grabs a manure fork and drives it through the creature's exposed spine. The weapon pins it down moments before infected teeth can reach Field's flesh. One bite would require church treatment, costing 100 gold coins to survive. Field rubs Ashina's head and promises 1 gold coin for saving his life. Her red eyes brighten because she has never possessed anything close to that amount. Their example finally moves several male slaves beyond the worst of their fear. They seize axes, sickles, and farming forks before attacking through gaps between carts. The corpses prove dangerous mainly through infection numbers and complete disregard for pain. Against a prepared barrier, their mindless lunges expose them to repeated killing blows. Connor's riders finish the remaining creatures, though one man falls from his horse. A corpse drags him down by his cape and his skull cracks against stone. Field orders every monster beheaded and burned before corruption spreads into surrounding soil. His research warned that abandoned remains eventually generate fresh zones of infection. The rescued villagers kneel, kiss his boots, and explain how their settlement was destroyed. Death fog entered during the night, while most residents slept inside their homes. Victims awakened as corpse creatures, leaving only a small group capable of escaping. Baron Bull and his god-chosen had departed earlier to investigate a suspicious cult. His son Richard remained responsible for protecting the fortress and neighboring villages. Field approaches Cashin expecting military order, but the outer walls stand completely abandoned. Towers, catapults, crossbow positions, and oil cauldrons remain ready without soldiers operating them. All surviving troops have withdrawn behind the inner castle walls illuminated by torches. Richard appears above the sealed gate and refuses Field's request for northern passage. He threatens to shoot the caravan while claiming no entrance can open before his father returns. Field mentions years of financial support, but Richard dismisses every previous donation. Even the refugees receive no mercy from the Lord responsible for their protection. Richard calls them extramouths and promises arrows if they move closer. His cowardice abandoned the outer defenses, allowing corrupted creatures to wander beyond the fortress. He even welcomes nightfall, becoming a buffer between those monsters and his inner walls. Richard warns that he will never reopen the gates if Field later retreats south. The rejected refugees attempt to disappear before Field notices their ownerless condition. He stops them with a deliberately ruthless choice between service payment or execution. The villagers kneel immediately because threats sound more believable than unexpected noble compassion. Ashina also relaxes, finding cruelty easier to understand than Field's recent kindness. Field hides his frustration after learning that fear governs this world more efficiently. Richard directs the caravan toward a northern gate he confidently describes as safe. The system map reveals numerous skull symbols waiting throughout that exact route. Field realizes Richard intends to send them directly into another corpse ambush. Yet the abandoned outer fortress also contains weapons provisions and equipment without supervision. Since its defenders refuse their duty, Field decides their resources require a better owner. He chooses 30 strong slaves, prioritizing those who fought beside him at the carts. Before entering, Field encourages Connor to join a heroic effort against local corruption. Connor refuses, mocks the slave force, and declares his escort assignment officially completed. The cavalry rides south, leaving Field free to move without hostile witnesses nearby. Field arms his chosen workers and follows the map into an isolated stretch of forest. There, Ashina's changed status reveals that her divine awakening can finally begin. Field removes the awakening crystal purchased with nearly 1/8 of his remaining wealth. Ashina studies the glowing sphere without believing that divine power could ever choose her. Field claims that spiritual guidance revealed her potential and asks her to trust him. She closes her eyes, places both hands against the crystal, and waits in nervous silence. Blue starlight erupts across the forest before gathering into the image of a winter goddess. Every subhuman present drops to their knees, because the apparition belongs to their ancient deity. The goddess's light condenses into a rune that settles upon Ashina's hand. Divine energy reshapes her body, making her taller, sharper, and pale as untouched snow. Her red eyes open with an icy radiance that forces nearby slaves to lower their gazes. Ashina has awakened as a first-rank wolf cavalry god chosen. She stares at Field with awe, unable to understand how he predicted the impossible. Field dismisses the miracle, casually protecting the system's existence behind manufactured confidence. The watching slaves interpret his certainty as evidence that the gods favor their new lord. Fear begins changing into genuine loyalty as Ashina requests an immediate territorial contract. Her divine rune connects with Field, sealing a bond between Lord and God chosen. He publicly destroys her slave contract and recognizes her as Nightfall's first free citizen. Ashina smiles before summoning a creature that makes every nearby horse recoil. A massive dragon wolf emerges from darkness, armored in scales and surrounded by freezing energy. The divine mount alone possesses strength comparable to a third-rank combat knight. Ashina also receives expert cavalry techniques in the Spear of Extreme Cold. Her legion skill can double the striking force of mounted soldiers during a charge. For the first time, Field possesses power capable of changing his northern fate. Thoughts of his stepmother and murderous brother return, but revenge must wait. The abandoned fortress contains immediate resources that Nightfall needs far more than vengeance. Field lights a fog-clearing lantern and leads his armed workers through the deserted outer defenses. Scattered corpse soldiers wander among barracks, where the mist killed them before weapons were drawn. Field orders Ashina to eliminate them while preserving every usable piece of armor. She kicks through a barracks door, and the noise attracts corrupted soldiers from nearby halls. Her blade removes the first head before the second monster can finish turning. More armored corpses flood the corridor, forcing Ashina to summon her dragon wolf. The beast blocks the passage and releases blue fire through the packed formation. Every corpse becomes ash within seconds, along with much of the armor Field wanted. He hides his disappointment and orders the slaves to create enough noise to attract stragglers. Ashina and her mount destroy each approaching group until the barracks district falls silent. A searching slave soon discovers survivors sealed inside a bunker, protected by purification potion. Field immediately dismisses the dragon wolf before strangers can witness Ashina's divine identity. 10 soldiers emerge under a bearded officer who initially mistakes Field for a young knight. Once Field identifies himself, recognition passes through the officer's calculating expression. The soldiers had become drunk, forgotten their lantern, and allowed fog into the barracks. Baron Bull would execute them for losing their position, leaving desertion as their only future. The officer decides that murdering an unguarded noble will finance their escape. His men surround Field while laughing at the generous fool known throughout the border. Field understands that his old reputation has once again encouraged predators to approach willingly. He signals Ashina just as one deserter lunges forward with a concealed knife. A blue blur crosses the bunker, and the attacker's arm separates at the shoulder. The dragon wolf materializes behind the soldiers, filling the corridor with scales and cold vapor. Their courage vanishes when they realize the helpless noble secretly commands a god chosen. Field orders Ashina to cripple them, then offers silver for every kill completed by a slave. The wounded deserters cannot resist while armored workers rush forward with sickles and axes. One slave removes a soldier's head and receives his promised coin immediately. Field declares that workers under his authority may own property and earn their freedom. One silver coin represents months of food transforming hesitation into savage determination. The dragon wolf crushes plate armor while the slaves finish every fallen enemy. Beyond the bunker lies an armory large enough to equip 500 professional soldiers. Oiled armor fills shelves beside halberds, sabers, shields, crossbows, and barrels of arrows. Field nearly shouts with triumph before ordering everyone to equip themselves immediately. Armor hangs loosely from their starved bodies, yet pride changes the way they stand. Field then sends Wildcat and 20 armed slaves toward the villages supplying the fortress. They carry Baron Bull's banner, allowing them to enter Oxhorn village without resistance. Following Field's instructions, Wildcat overwhelms suspicion through threats, insults, and invented taxes. The village chief surrenders livestock, grain, coins, and every resource demanded in the Baron's name. Meanwhile, Field empties the armory and lowers equipment beyond the outer walls for later transport. Richard abandoned these defenses after trying to sacrifice Nightfall as his personal shield. Field therefore feels no guilt transferring the fortress's resources into more responsible hands. Another bunker contains 3 fog-clearing lanterns and valuable healing potions. Wildcat returns with cattle, sheep, poultry, grain carts, and more money than expected. He also brings a young girl offered by the village chief as tribute to Baron Bull. Returning her would expose the deception and condemn her to another predatory noble. Field keeps her with the caravan while sending Wildcat toward the remaining villages. Every participant receives a silver coin, and Field announces a path toward legal freedom. Any slave who pays 1 gold coin may become a citizen of Nightfall domain. Hope spreads through people who previously expected nothing beyond labor and eventual death. Before Imperial investigators arrive, the caravan gathers its stolen equipment and enters the north. Field's destination is Starnight Manor, once owned by Baroness Sophia Starnight. Capturing an existing estate offers a chance that constructing a fortress from nothing cannot provide. Field lights another costly lantern and the procession crosses into the gray fog. Sound disappears beneath a sky hidden by mist, as though the group has entered deep water. Corrupted tendrils crawl across the road and coil around wooden wheels. Rusted spears display shriveled heads beside faded banners from failed Imperial expeditions. Every ruin warns that armies entered this place before and became part of it. A corpse emerges from the fog, and Ashina destroys its skull with 1 arrow. The system map immediately fills with markers, representing a much larger approaching swarm. Field circles the cart's positions, shields, and arms, 20 inexperienced crossbowmen. The first volley drops the front row as black waves of corpses enter lantern light. Ashina charges through them on the dragon wolf, scattering heads and crushed bodies. Blue flames spiral outward and reduce the densest formation to drifting ash. Wildcat's armored guards hold their line while claws ring harmlessly against stolen plate. Then a fast marker appears directly above Field, warning him to leave his saddle. He dives away as a bat-like woman descends with talons aimed at his head. The creature seizes a female slave, tears her apart in the air, and releases the pieces. Crossbow bolts strike at its wings, bringing the monster crashing onto corrupted ground. Field takes a halberd and personally destroys its skull for attacking his people. During that distraction, corpses overwhelm one side of the formation. The dragon wolf releases a blast so hot that soldiers begin cooking inside their armor. The first major wave finally ends with several slaves and 1 guard dead. Field accepts the losses grimly, knowing the alternative would have been complete destruction. 19 organized warning symbols then approach through the mist from behind. Field sends Ashina forward to conceal herself and prepare an ambush. Captain Connor appears with the cavalry that supposedly returned south. They came back to murder Field, steal the lanterns, and let corruption erase the evidence. Instead of helpless captives, Connor finds armored infantry and loaded crossbows awaiting his charge. He orders retreat, but the dragon wolf appears behind the riders and terrifies their horses. Connor crashes to the ground with Ashina's spear already resting against his throat. She takes his lantern, leaving every rider dependent upon Field for survival. Connor finally recognizes the former slave and understands that she has awakened. Field approaches warmly and pretends to believe the captain returned from honorable concern. Cornered by that performance, Connor accepts the excuse and orders his riders to dismount. Once they relax, Field claims their horses for transporting supplies toward nightfall. Connor protests until the dragon wolf bites one cavalryman's head completely away. The remaining soldiers collapse and Connor confesses that Field's sister Liz ordered the assassination. Field places the traitors at the front as scouts against a massive approaching horde. Over 3 brutal days, Connor's riders die one by one while absorbing repeated attacks. Corruption spreads through Connor's final wounds before Ashna ends his suffering with an arrow. The survivors take everything useful from his body and continue toward Star Knight Manor. Rusted gates finally appear through the mist, and exhausted voices rise in celebration. The estate covers vast grounds filled with villas, gardens, barns, stables, and vineyards. 10 years of corruption ruined nearly everything, yet traces of immense former wealth remain. The main mansion contains countless skull markers and one enormous presence beneath its basement. A crushing pressure reaches Field through broken windows, forcing him to look away. He refuses to enter the mansion and selects the Stone Winery as their first base. Its surrounding fields once produced black pearl grapes used for the Empire's finest wine. Now corrupted flesh, eyeballed growths, and harmless tentacles cover the poisoned soil. Workers hesitate until Field offers copper payments for clearing the land within 2 days. The promised reward transforms fear into furious labor across the abandoned farmland. Free villagers complain that the purple soil will never support crops again. Wildcats guards silently draw their swords, ending the protest before it becomes defiance. Field punishes the loudest man and sends the others toward the eastern fields. Control is unpleasant but essential where no law exists beyond his own authority. Inside the winery, numerous footsteps answer Ashna's warning from the dark second floor. Field forbids fire because one careless attack could destroy their only solid shelter. Shields and halberds form a narrow line while Ashna and her wolf receive the first rush. Corpses pile upon the dragon wolf without damaging its dark scales. One guard falls beneath several monsters until Field steps forward and cuts through their skulls. He pulls the terrified man upright and promises that disciplined survivors may someday become knights. That personal rescue convinces the guards that his rewards are not empty, noble lies. They charge again with renewed courage and clear more than 70 creatures from the building. Deeper inside, a third-rank rat monster bursts through a shield and attacks Field. Its massive claws rake the dragon wolf, instead dislodging only 2 bloodied scales. Ordinary blades cannot penetrate its hide, while one sweep throws armored men across the room. Ashina drives her spear into its body as the wolf slams it backward. Blue starlight gathers into the spear of extreme cold above her hands. She hurls the divine weapon, liquefying flesh and breaking bones against the surrounding walls. The victory leaves Ashina pale and exhausted, though a promised steak revives her enthusiasm. Field later discovers sealed barrels beneath the winery inside a partially collapsed cellar. One open lid releases the unmistakable aroma of black pearl wine. The vintage disappeared after the North fell, making each surviving barrel extraordinarily valuable. Field realizes that the cursed estate contains not only shelter but potential trade wealth. Workers clear corruption while Field studies the class divisions within his growing population. He refuses to imitate nobles who treat commoners as disposable dirt beneath expensive boots. However, he also rejects the original Field's ruinous habit of sacrificing everything without limits. Good behavior will earn security money and dignity under Nightfall's laws. Field introduces servant bonuses designed to reward effort and expose dishonesty through competition. Claypot receives the first silver coin after Field notices his careful work during the journey. The frightened servant falls at his feet, while others immediately become eager to outperform him. Chow questions equal treatment for subhumans, revealing the prejudice considered normal throughout the Empire. Field reminds him that survival matters more than inherited hatred inside a poisoned wasteland. That evening, Field explains to Ashina that Nightfall must survive through exploration and plunder. The territory lacks skilled labor, healthy soil, secure walls, and reliable food production. He intends to build mounted raiders using the horses unintentionally donated by Connor's cavalry. Ashina supports the plan after learning that Adrian threatened everyone Field might someday love. The next morning, Field gathers the entire population beside a chest overflowing with coins. He pays each fighter 1 silver for every corpse killed during previous battles. Ironhammer earns 17 silver coins, more wealth than many commoners see in years. Those who refuse to fight now watch the rewards with visible regret. Field repeats that one earned gold coin purchases freedom and citizenship. Farming, construction, patrols, repairs, and monster hunting will all provide paid opportunities. He prohibits racial discrimination because human and subhuman survival now depends upon cooperation. Ashina's position as God-chosen makes the new law impossible to dismiss openly. Field also orders daily prayers to Ashina because faith may accelerate her divine growth. Military recruitment follows, offering 3 meals and combat rewards instead of regular salary. Applicants run 5 laps, while Field removes quitters, cheaters, and those lacking determination. 23 recruits remain, including 1 exhausted man who finishes through stubborn will alone. Field forms a 20-person raiding cavalry and a 33-person defensive squad. Chow protests that slaves cannot become reliable soldiers without noble blood or family training. Field answers by improving their food and taking them into the fog for practical experience. At Rum Village, frightened recruits face 7 corpses under Wildcat's supervision. One soldier trembles repeatedly before finally driving his halberd into a restrained monster. His first kill gives the others enough courage to follow. The guards advance with synchronized footsteps as repeated victories build discipline naturally. A migrating horde of corrupted monkeys suddenly floods the village from every direction. Field directs everyone into a courtyard where stone walls provide a defensible position. Crossbows thin the wave while Ashina holds the gate beside her dragon wolf. Monkeys bury the beast beneath bodies yet cannot crack even one scale. After 30 minutes, the migration passes and leaves the defenders alive. Human soldiers now respect Ashina because her strength protected every weakness in their formation. Scavengers later discover green plants surviving within a protected farmhouse courtyard. Field touches one and immediately inhales a substance that overwhelms judgment and physical control. He grabs Ashina before she realizes the plant acts as an intense reproductive stimulant. She restrains him carefully, fearing that divine strength might injure the person she protects. Ashina purges the effect while Field awakens without memories of his embarrassing behavior. Once informed, he identifies the plant's potential for breeding livestock rather than destroying it. Ashina collects samples safely because God-chosen bodies resist magical and corrupting influences. Back at the winery, cleared fields reveal another problem far more difficult than monsters. Not one carpenter, mason, blacksmith, or other skilled craftsman exists among Field's people. Guild control prevents ordinary workers from relocating freely, especially into a cursed territory. Field decides he must visit Maple City personally to recruit talent and establish trade. Before departure, an invisible force flows through him as nightfall gains its first stability. Field becomes a first-rank lord and receives a detailed territorial status panel. Happiness remains deeply negative, while environmental corruption approaches complete devastation. Yet his new prosperity field can repel death fog permanently from controlled land. He extinguishes every expensive lantern, causing panic until the fog stops at the territorial boundary. Celebration erupts because nightfall finally possesses a foothold that will not disappear without church supplies. Ashina's contract also grants beast-taming talent and the potential to empower wolf cavalry. The discovery means survival is no longer a temporary illusion sustained by burning gold. That night, intelligent attackers kill 2 slaves and abduct a woman before escaping into the fog. Their absence from distant map detection reveals a dangerous limitation in Field's system. Ordinary living enemies appear only when nearby or openly hostile toward him. Ashina tracks the raiders through scent using her dragon wolf. They find gray fog goblins abusing the abducted woman's corpse inside a corrupted forest. Rage hardens Field's decision before Ashina destroys the entire raiding party except one survivor. The frightened goblin leads them directly toward a hidden tribal camp. Nearly 100 adapted creatures live there, proving that intelligent species survived the catastrophe. These goblins can breathe death fog, reproduce quickly, and attack nightfall without lanterns. Field orders complete extermination before the tribe can grow into a permanent enemy. Blue fire consumes the camp while Ashina eliminates every fighter attempting escape. A concealed nursery confirms that the goblins breed through corrupted animals. Field destroys the offspring and mothers refusing to leave a future revenge force behind. Among the stolen relics, he discovers 24 aging magical scrolls inside a locked chest. One test scroll produces only a weak flame before becoming useless paper. The remaining scrolls still promise enough value to finance several months of survival. Returning with proof of victory makes Nightfall's population view Field as a lord who avenges slaves. He responds to the failed defense by introducing regular drills instead of fatal whippings. Meat and eggs motivate hungry soldiers more effectively than fear alone ever could. Discipline improves while the winery inventory reveals numerous barrels of valuable surviving alcohol. 10 barrels of black pearl wine will accompany Field toward Maple City. He also brings Ashina 20 cavalry riders, several guards cargo slaves, and magical scrolls. The group fights through repeated corpse swarms until clean sunlight finally appears beyond the border. Maple City rises among mountains as the Empire's most famous center of pleasure and gambling. Flowers decorate low walls while brothels, taverns, merchants, and adventurers crowd every road. Field visits Baron Simon Maple, who surrounds himself with servants, hot springs, and calculated temptation. Simon's hospitality is designed to create an heir with inheritance rights over Nightfall domain. Field avoids every offered woman and presents a giant rat skull before revealing the wine. He transforms the simple cellar discovery into a tale of divine lightning and monstrous sacrifice. Simon believes every detail and offers 500 gold coins for each rare barrel. Field sells all 10 deposits, most of the fortune, and secures Nightfall's immediate finances. Simon then attempts to lure him toward the exquisite dancer, a god-chosen seductress. Field escapes the trap by discussing trade livestock and the purchase of giant wolves. At the Guild District, he recruits Tate, an honest former prison warden with literacy and administrative experience. Then Adrian's advisor, Kutch, appears shocked because the Rose family already celebrated Field's death. Field hides his hostility behind a weak smile while preparing to turn Adrian's arrogance into his next source of wealth. Kutch refuses to surrender Grey Dog, believing Field remains the harmless brother everyone remembers. Field accepts the insult meekly, letting Adrian's advisor mistake restraint for weakness. Outside, Ironhammer offers to seize the carpenter by force and punish Kutch immediately. Field tells him to remain patient because the trap has not finished closing. Nightfall still needs lanterns, purification potions, food, fabric, animals, and additional workers. At the church, an old priest demands 25 gold coins for every fog lantern. Field prepares to purchase the limited stock until a large-nosed merchant interrupts the transaction. The stranger repeatedly increases the price, forcing Field to abandon the supplies publicly. Around the corner, Kutch's son Lance congratulates the merchant for humiliating his uncle. Kutch's money financed the prank, and they plan to return everything afterward. They believe Adrian's protection makes tormenting Field completely safe and endlessly entertaining. Field already sent a guard away with gold and very different instructions. He next enters the Mage Guild carrying the old scrolls recovered from the Goblin camp. Their magic has weakened with age, but the chief mage still pays 150 gold. The large-nosed merchant appears again, ready to continue Lance's childish competition. Field pretends to desire an expensive spellbook that allows vision through a bird. His rival immediately offers more, and the chief mage recognizes Field's secret signal. Field selects another book, then another, acting increasingly furious after every defeat. The merchant purchases uselessly expensive volumes through Adrian's credit account without understanding the danger. His total obligation reaches 1,300 gold coins before Field finally concedes. Once Field leaves, the panicked buyer attempts to return everything and recover Kutch's money. The chief mage refuses, warning that only Adrian may personally reverse those transactions. The merchant stumbles outside beneath books and church supplies he cannot afford. A dozen hired killers suddenly surround him while shouting accusations about another man's wife. Rusted knives enter his throat and body before his escorts can organize resistance. Lance watches from across the street as his celebration cake nearly falls from his hands. Ironhammer's guards calmly collect the dead merchant's horses, purchases, and magical books. Everything was bought through Adrian's money, yet Field now receives the entire shipment. Across the chaos, Field catches Lance's eyes and draws one finger across his throat. The message destroys every trace of amusement on the young man's face. Nearly 2,000 gold coins and resources join Nightfall through one carefully arranged street murder. Field feels no guilt because this society already permits nobles to kill commoners cheaply. The following morning, Kutch's caravan leaves Maple City before Field can block the road. However, Field's map and scouts reveal the route taken through the surrounding countryside. He gathers Ashina and the raiding cavalry beneath black cloaks that conceal their identities. Kutch's guards include Gareth, a proud second-ranked knight, expecting easy glory against bandits. Field's 20 riders have survived corpse hordes, but remain ordinary soldiers beneath stolen armor. Gareth could destroy their entire formation if Ashina did not control the battlefield. The knight charges eagerly until the dragon wolf howls from a nearby hill. His horse nearly collapses as combat aura senses a predator beyond his strength. Ashina appears upon the ridge, her black cloak moving around the scaled divine beast. Gareth understands that even a first-rank combat god chosen can kill stronger knights. Pride prevents retreat because cowardice would ruin his reputation and future employment. He advances with 5 squires while offering Ashina luxury under Adrian's service. She ignores the invitation and the dragon wolf launches a pillar of blue flame. Gareth reinforces his lance with white aura and deflects the blast at terrible physical cost. His organs shake from the impact, but he commits to a full-mounted charge. Aura wraps horse and rider before they strike the ground hard enough to form a crater. Ashina has already moved, making the enormous dragon wolf seem faster than sight. While she tests, Gareth Silverclaw receives Field's signal and raises his lance. 20 subhuman riders descend together, producing thunder far greater than their small number suggests. Kutch forces hired workers forward with crossbows, hoping peasants will absorb the impact. Their scattered bolts strike full-plate armor and bounce away with harmless metallic sounds. One rider falls after an unlucky shot enters his shin near the armor joint. Before anyone reloads, Nightfall's cavalry crashes through the frightened human barrier. A lance destroys one crossbowman's shoulder while hooves crush his fallen body. The workers flee immediately because hauling cargo never included dying for Adrian Rose. Their retreat collides with Kutch's guards and destroys the defensive formation from within. Wolf's subhumans draw sabers cutting downward as horses trample anyone knocked beneath them. Screams, pleas, and war cries merge while Field watches without turning away. Gareth once possessed enough strength to terrify normal soldiers, but Ashina stops playing. Her spear thrusts become a river of silver light surrounding knight and squires. More than a dozen strikes enter Gareth before he understands that defense has failed. His squires fall together dead before their bodies reach the blood-soaked ground. The dragon wolf catches Gareth in its jaws and crushes aura-reinforced armor. With their champion dead, the caravan's surviving defenders lose every reason to resist. Field ends the attack after 3 riders suffer injuries and none are killed. Every enemy head earns silver while Nightfall pays complete treatment for wounded soldiers. Silverclaw drags Kutch and Lance forward before the black-cloaked commander. Field reveals his face and both captives finally understand who arranged their destruction. Under violent questioning, Lance describes Adrian's knight soldiers, militia, and divine contractor. Adrian commands a 4th-ranked knight, 12 3rd-ranked knights, and 500 permanent soldiers. In wartime, his territory can also raise approximately 3,000 militia fighters. His contracted god chosen is Allison, the 2nd-rank flame spirit butterfly. She casts destructive magic rapidly and leads a supernatural unit of trained battle mages. Adrian controls only part of those forces because many knights remain loyal to Count Rose. Even so, Field recognizes that direct war against his brother would currently be suicide. He announces forgiveness and turns away, allowing hope to return to both captives. A silent throat-cutting gesture gives Silverclaw the actual conclusion. Riders tackle Kutch and Lance, stabbing repeatedly while they curse Field's name. Field forgave them personally, but never promised that his soldiers shared the sentiment. 7 surviving workers emerge from hiding, including Grey Dog beneath an overturned vegetable cart. The carpenter kneels in terror and accepts immediate employment within Nightfall domain. Kutch's cargo contains 60 combat aura potions worth at least 50 gold coins each. Field also gains cash healing medicine, silk horses, weapons, and Gareth's armor. The entire raid produces property worth approximately 5,000 gold coins. Field jokes that family wealth naturally belongs to every loving brother. Back near Maple City, Tate waits with his mother, wife, and daughter. He sold his home after accepting Field's offer and feared the Baron might disappear. Field welcomes the family and begins spending Adrian's accidental contribution on Nightfall's growth. 300 additional slaves join the caravan, mostly weak men, elders, and laborers. Food for 3 months, livestock, furniture, clothing, pigeons, and pack animals follow. Tate immediately organizes workers by strength and distributes cargo with practical efficiency. At the northern border, a church expedition camps beside Field's enormous procession. 30 holy knights and 20 nuns accompany Eliza, a third-rank god chosen. The church claims authority across nations, taxes rulers, and launches wars under divine doctrine. Eliza recognizes Field and treats his survival as proof of holy intervention. Field worries that she will sense Ashina, but their concealed divine signatures remain undetected. Contracted God-chosen can apparently shield themselves from others with comparable abilities. Eliza offers to establish a church and military camp inside Nightfall Domain. Her proposal sounds protective, yet a third-rank divine warrior would dominate the young settlement. Field remembers that the church offered nothing when he first entered the cursed land. Now that he created a foothold, religious leaders suddenly desire permanent influence there. He declines politely and requests gold lanterns or potions instead of occupying forces. Eliza refuses, then reveals that her expedition seeks divine artifacts lost across the north. Such relics formed from dead god chosen and slowly deteriorate without proper recovery. Field offers territorial assistance in exchange for supplies, but she rejects every condition. Neither side obtains what it wants, so they separate beneath carefully maintained courtesy. Field leads more than 300 people into the fog under 50 armed escorts. Their size and slowness attract corpse hordes from forest's ruins and corrupted ground. Tate nearly flees after seeing his first monster until Silverclaw's blood-stained sabers stop him. He realizes that escaping Nightfall's cavalry may be more dangerous than facing the dead. Ashina's dragonwolf smashes through repeated waves while riders prevent slaves from scattering. Every delay attracts more creatures, turning the return journey into continuous slaughter. 39 people, several animals, and nearly all remaining confidants are lost before home appears. Tate's family collapses outside the crumbling winery after surviving the final attacks. Field describes the settlement honestly as a prison whose walls are made from fog. Tate must assign labor, prevent violence, maintain order, and rehabilitate hundreds of damaged people. Unlike ordinary prisoners, Nightfall's slaves can earn freedom through useful work. While Field traveled, workers began cultivating purified land with bare hands and crude hoes. Returning residents surround him because his death would remove the prosperity Field protecting everyone. Ashina looks exhausted after fighting almost continuously across the entire route. Field credits her and his soldiers publicly while keeping the system map secret. Their posture straightens immediately when praise confirms that the Lord recognizes sacrifice. Nightfall now possesses supplies, animals, workers, craftsmen, medicine, and several months of food. Yet new mouths, ruined buildings, exposed borders, and corrupted wilderness multiply every challenge. Tate begins work without resting because his family's survival now depends upon this territory. Field orders reclamation before taxation. Understanding that impossible quotas produce only lies and starvation. Every purified field and building expands the land permanently protected from death fog. The second priority is transforming slaves into skilled workers capable of supporting free lives. Tate must also stop stronger captives from exploiting those weaker than themselves. Oppression does not make every victim virtuous, and suffering never erases human cruelty. The administrator is astonished by priorities focused on foundations instead of immediate noble profit. Field's modern understanding appears revolutionary within a society obsessed with taxes and inheritance. The next morning, Ashina appears in a lace-trimmed noble dress purchased from Maple City. She spends her day away from combat, joining Field on an inspection of ordinary workers. They immediately discover that his prohibition against public defecation has completely failed. Hundreds received multiple warnings, making the punishment system meaningless and impossible to track. Field replaces it with immediate fines or lashes and designated collection pits. He orders waste gathered, composted, and eventually spread across exhausted farmland. Old Turtledove reacts as though the Lord has proposed poisoning every crop deliberately. Local farmers know watering, weeding, insects, and prayer, but nothing about restoring nutrients. Magic made practical experimentation unnecessary because failure is always blamed upon insufficient faith. Field orders slave-managed fields to use compost, raised ridges, and deeper repeated tilling. Free villagers may follow traditional methods, creating a comparison between both approaches. His knowledge is basic, yet even basic agriculture may transform this wasteful medieval system. Inside the kitchen, Field also challenges Plate's obsession with combining meat and sweet fruit. He dictates a dry beef dish using oil, onions, mushrooms, radishes, and chilies. The cook resists every instruction that does not involve oranges, apples, or unnecessary water. Outside, hungry slaves stampede toward generous portions of bread and barley porridge. Well-fed guards restore order and prevent free villagers from stealing children's rations. Twin sisters Whitefeather and Blackfeather each receive 2 loaves. Their father died for collecting wood, while violence and despair later destroyed their mother. The girls save half their food because experience taught them that kindness never lasts. Many slaves do the same, unable to believe that tomorrow's meal will actually arrive. Field servants finally taste his new dish and abandon every previous complaint. Even Ashina fills her cheeks completely and answers approval with one raised thumb. These small victories reveal a territory becoming functional through discipline, incentives, and observation. After 2 quiet days, Ashina reports that an unknown creature watched nightfall before dawn. Its scent is unfamiliar, its hostility overwhelming, and its movements evade even her senses. What could frighten a woman who faced a third-rank monster without hesitation? Ashina recommends 5-person patrols, signal horns, and stronger defenses around the settlement. Field agrees, but construction requires lumber from an abandoned yard east of the winery. He leads Wildcat's guards there while Ashina scouts along a corrupted lake. The soldiers now kill scattered corpses, quietly displaying skill unimaginable several weeks earlier. Wildcat traps limbs, pierces throats, and crushes skulls without wasting movement. Field practices mounted combat, while Ashina teaches him never to stop inside enemy formations. Near the bridge, faint human cries drift from across the water. The map shows only monster markers, while Ashina detects no living scent. Field refuses to investigate blindly, recognizing that northern predators may imitate desperate voices. A hidden crocodile erupts from the lake when Ashina reaches toward a magical flower. The second-rank creature measures several body lengths and swings a tail capable of cratering stone. Ashina avoids its jaws, appears behind the beast, and drives her spear through its body. Divine power splits the skull, while corrupted fish crawl ashore toward the spilled blood. The dragon wolf burns them and drags the enormous carcass onto the riverbank. Ashina seals the purple flower inside a jar before Field can touch or smell it. She remembers his previous reaction to unknown plants and refuses another embarrassing accident. The repeated cries continue from the lumberyard, where corpses crowd around intact buildings. Ashina cannot use fire near the valuable wood, so she lures monsters into open ground. The dragon wolf incinerates them safely, leaving workshops, housing, and stockpiled lumber undamaged. Field praises her success, and Ashina demands head pats as treatment for battle fatigue. Her tale reveals complete satisfaction before the group enters the abandoned worker housing. Another scream erupts from an empty room filled with body parts and overturned furniture. Experienced soldiers freeze because a voice without a visible body terrifies them more than corpses. Ashina follows the hollow echo toward a carpet concealing a hidden trapdoor. Opening it releases such concentrated blood stench that even she leaps backward. No creature emerges, and the voice continues through a weakened, magical recording stone. Field and Ashina descend into a basement transformed into a ritual slaughter chamber. 5 young women remain nailed to walls, mutilated and surrounded by corrupted worms. Blood channels converge upon a magic circle containing the remains of a murdered nun. The recording repeats her final terror as a shadowy figure removes limbs and implants something. Ashina concludes that someone hunted church god chosen and murdered them through ritual experimentation. Neither imperial politics nor religious conflict explains why the crime occurred inside Nightfall. On the central corpse, Ashina discovers a silver brooch untouched by years of filth. The recording stops when she removes it, leaving the basement in sudden silence. It is a first-rank divine artifact crystallized from the dead nun's soul and power. Similar relics can sell for fortunes exceeding everything Nightfall has recovered combined. Ashina cannot use holy light energy, so Field claims the brooch through his blood. Warm power enters him as the artifact bonds and reveals its abilities. The silver iris brooch can change his visible appearance, body shape, and voice. Its illusion cannot alter scent, heartbeat, or physical structure beneath the disguise. It can also transform into a silver longsword, though its full strength remains inaccessible. Field tests the disguise by becoming Ashina's perfect visual duplicate. She recognizes him through scent and warns that powerful trackers may do the same. Even with limitations, the artifact opens possibilities for infiltration, espionage, and impersonation. Field takes the recording stone as possible leverage and orders every victim buried respectfully. Outside, Wildcat reports enough timber to begin walls repairs, housing, and defensive construction. The group prepares to transport smaller planks, while leaving massive logs for another expedition. Field opens the system map to select the safest route back toward the winery. A crimson marker crawls along the outer edge of Nightfall's protected territory. He recognizes the presence that once watched from beneath Star Night Manor's main building. That marker remained underground from the day Field arrived, waiting beyond his current strength. Now it has escaped to the basement and brought a sudden swarm of monsters. Ashina races toward the winery while Field abandons the lumber and forces everyone home. Warning horns sound as workers stampede inside the marble building and guards deploy outward. Wooden training forts channel incoming corpses into narrow lanes where halberds can reach them. Ironhammer leads reinforcements toward the perimeter while counting the silver needed for freedom. An oversized corpse breaks ahead of the horde with one grotesquely enlarged arm. Behind it, countless monsters surge toward Nightfall under the Crimson Presence's unseen command. The enemy, beneath Star Night Manor, has finally moved, and Nightfall now faces its first true invasion.